Capcom really has become one of the developers that are simply raising the bar on what a good release would look like in the past several years. My admiration for their work not only stems from the guaranteed fan bases they'll get from putting out titles like Resident Evil, Street Fighter, or Monster Hunter, but also their willingness to take risks on new IPs. The fascinating show of culture and history you get out of Kunitsugami, the hero shooter that you all thought would be another old dino game being brought back to life, Exoprimal, and now the game that had a lot of struggles after its initial reveal, Pragmata. Each of these facing different levels of success, and today I'd like to share with you why I think Pragmata just made it past the 2 million copies sold mark at the time of this writing. This was a game I was able to try out in last year's Tokyo Game Show, and my impressions with the demo left me pretty satisfied and interested with what it had. It was a matter of how well they would keep things interesting for the entire playthrough of the full game, and now that I've finally rolled credits on it, I think this game is indeed what it says on Twitter. It is not a Megaman game. You are, however, joined by a blue robot who happens to look like a young kid who helps you fight other robots that have gone rogue, where said blue robot gets stronger as you progress through the game after beating respective level bosses, where you find power-ups and upgrades and mods by thoroughly exploring the areas you just visit, which doesn't sound at all like Mega Man, right? Anyway, let's settle down, put down the pieces, and see what makes this game so great and recommended in my books. Oh, there's also a charge pack. Okay, take it out. Can't trust the bot. This title is another product of Capcom's RE engine, which does a spectacular job of making the 3D printed world of Pragmata look flashy and interesting. The laboratory theme fits with making the areas look like the inside of a chip factory, being clean, simple, and shiny. Pairing it with the rather minimalist interface the game provides, it does remind me of Kojima's Death Stranding a bit, especially with how it feels to go around the shelter area. With the concept of being able to replicate anything to a convincing degree, the settings you are taken to can go in any direction, from the sterilized production rooms of the shelter, to the confusing streets of New York, to an even overgrown jungle. The change in setting helps you feel like you progress through the game, as it also shows you new obstacles and objectives that fall in tune with your new playground. I was playing this on the PlayStation 5, but I've seen the PC setups that can take it to the next level with their lighting effects and reflections. It's pretty nice, which really shine during the city section of the game as well. And based on reports on it by other people on the internet, the PC performance is also pretty good. So I think this game will do well on any platform you decide to pick it up on, but you do have to look up those minimum specs. With how the characters look, there's really not a lot to talk about with the exception of Diana, our little Pragmata assistant, who not only has a wonderfully expressive face, but is matched with all of the game's hair physics. The robot girl is adorable by all accounts, where honestly I think it's laid on a little thick at times, but not to the point that I'm actually bothered by it. Other characters and every other robot in the game are a bit more mechanical. Ironically, Hugh's default spacesuit and posture makes me think of him as something closer to Mechagodzilla than a human, which I think is cool in its own right. And then there's the basic humanoid enemies that make me think they belong in a Silent Hill game. And I think that's a good thing, because it makes me want to shoot them down as quickly as possible. If there was anything I was a bit more upset about in the game, it's really more about what I can't see. The difficulty of playing the game simply spikes up when you have enemies out of your field of view. Your only other way of knowing if something's coming at you is if Diana's telling you about it, screaming at you to dodge. And I can understand not wanting to crowd too much information on the screen, considering you have all this stuff like the hack window and the puzzles and the nodes. There's a lot of information to handle already. But I wish I could maybe zoom out a little better in the game to give me a bit more spatial awareness of what's around me. The sound dimension does a pretty satisfying job as well. I may have mentioned this before, but I'm a big fan of a game having scoring, or having music timed to specific moments during your playthrough, having them play in sync with certain points to enhance the intended experience. They pulled it off great here, especially since there's theming to go along with it. I really like it when there's basically the single melody that's used consistently through several BGMs throughout the game. And while Pragmata does it with such simplicity that it feels sincere and earnest, And that's kind of how it feels like when I see a child trying to connect with you or communicate with you for the first time. It's all these pieces getting put together that makes this cohesive experience. It's showing, it's telling, and demonstrating in front of you to just naturally let things fall into place in your head. I think it's wonderful work. The voice work will mainly focus on our two protagonists, Diana and Hugh's dialogue is the kind of stuff that just fills me with hope. It's not cynical, there's no need to constantly quip with each other, there's just enough humor to keep things light, which in other aspects seems weird, but I'm not really going to dwell on that. The only issue I have with the voice is the acting seems to lay it on a little thick sometimes, especially for Diana. But I do know and have met kids that sound exactly like this, so maybe it's just a little thick for my taste. Also, on that note, this would be one of the rare occasions that a weeb such as myself actually enjoys the English voices more than the Japanese ones. The expressions, the mouth movement, and the setting just seems to match better with English speaking lines as opposed to the Japanese ones. Despite this being a Japanese developed game, which I think really is more of a compliment for the actors and the directors involved. Pragmata, when you break it down to the buttons you press and what they do, doesn't seem all that impressive. You have half action gameplay that has your typical dodging and shooting of the weak points. Then you have hacking, which is the simplified puzzle solving half of the formula. And while the puzzle solving is rather easy in isolation, it can only be completed if you smoothly don't get hit in the process. What makes this interesting is both your shooting and hacking controls are accessible at any time by default on your controller layout. I honestly have a hard time imagining how you manage this with a mouse and keyboard layout, but hey, it's there. So you have robo-zombies constantly going for your throat, and the only way to deal meaningful damage to them is by opening up their armor through hacking. So having to manage your multifaceted defense and tracking what your enemies are doing, this can get a bit hectic at times. Pragmata sometimes feels more like a tactical game than an action game, and this occurred to me when I realized how using certain strategies or weapons made harder encounters like a cakewalk. My favorite crowd control weapon was the Riot Blaster, which can pretty much unlock non-tank enemies so long as you have ammo. Very much like how Jet Stingray can't do anything to you when you spam Frost Tower on him at a corner. This is from Megaman X4. There's really not a lot more to illustrate when it comes to what you do, but like in Nier Automata, what makes this hacking interesting is these rather simple tasks are applied throughout the world. You move bridges, unlock doors, activate devices, reverse and repel enemy attacks through Diana's ability to hack. How it's integrated into the more intense moments of Pragmata is what makes the presence of Hugh and Diana as a duo on an adventure feel real. It's something that I have to say you're going to have to play through to truly appreciate. It's only through actually experiencing the gameplay can you see how finely tuned the fights are and the system built around it. While it can feel overwhelming at first, once you get the hang of it, you're naturally making plans in your head, maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead. You know what all of your 6 weapons do. You know which enemies to take down first, and depending on your build, you should know how to do that. And yes, I did say builds, so we're gonna get to that in the next section. Progression in Pragmata is felt through 2 dimensions. One would be going through the major areas of the moon base, the other is upgrading the abilities of Hugh and Diana through buying them at the shelter, your hub world of operations. Both of these coincide quite well as tougher encounters await you deeper into your playthrough and you almost get the needed upgrades just in time. Like exploring digs in Mega Man Legends, taking your time to investigate the 3D space around you can uncover many pleasant and sometimes unpleasant surprises. A hidden path that's easily overlooked can be found, or a hidden upgrade, resource, or mod chip lying in wait behind a fake wall. Missing these isn't the end of the world either, as checkpoints that you can fast travel to are generously placed around each level, especially right before boss encounters. So naturally, once you get something significant like enough upgrade materials, stamps, or even some new toy for Diana to play with, you're never too far from a checkpoint to use them. The pacing is pretty perfect in this respect. You're never too far away from seeing something new within the game. It never feels rushed either, as you should be familiar enough with everything you've learned by the time you get started on this loop of giving you something new to deal with. It could be a new enemy type, a new weapon, an obstacle, or just an opportunity to take a breather with a new REM for Diana to play with. The game was designed to proceed at a pace that you found natural for yourself, and it wanted you to build an experience that you actively chose to make. Those choices, I think, are most felt with the build variety you can create with Pragmata. I've seen people review this game and have never really said anything about the three directions you can build your characters into. In general, every weapon answers some problems, but not every problem. A stasis net can freeze enemies for a certain duration, but they will recover rather quickly. A dummy hologram can fool bots, but sometimes they'll still target you instead. And the heat ray can do a lot of damage, but it needs time to ramp up that damage, as opposed to the shockwave gun that takes forever to reload but unloads a ton of pain in an instant. Hacking nodes supplement these by either targeting multiple enemies at the same time, making them more vulnerable to damage, heat, or even confusing their targeting system to make them hit each other. Mods can help augment the direction you're going for as well. So to draw a better picture for you, let's show you what I made. Around the midpoint of the game, you're given a new primary, the Pulse Carbine, which was tuned for causing more heat damage than direct damage. Heat damage in this game is basically the stun meter for the more generic game term. Filling it up knocks them down and opens them up for a critical shot attack, which most of the time kills them in one hit. So I set my hacking chips to combine stunning, multi-target, and heat up effects on the matrix. I use the carbine and supplement my damage with the missile launcher and remote drones. All of these weapons are described to deal extra heat damage. Finally, I arm mods that spread damage to nearby enemies on critical shot and help me build up heat damage faster. So I basically have an all heat focused build because I absolutely hate dealing with the tanks in this game. They take forever to die. But you can also create builds that are geared towards dealing direct damage, or even center everything around Diana, making her your primary DPS. Heck, I was initially just continuously upgrading the Charge Piercer because it was doing so much work for me in the earlier stages. There's also a reason to backtrack to other stages, as you will gain the ability to go through other obstacles as Diana gains new abilities. What lies in wait are usually challenges with decent enough prizes at the end of it. You can call it padding, but a lot of it you don't really need. In fact, upgrading at some point hands you reducing returns. You don't need to spend 3,000 game bits to heal another 50 HP when I have 1600 total. Nor does an extra 0.03 seconds of hack time feel significant for an increasing number of upgrade materials to do so. You go after them because you're either curious about what's out there or you're just a type that likes to complete things, and I'm a bit of both. Again, thanks to their checkpoint system, looking for the things I missed during my first run through was no pain at all. In fact, most of the encounters weren't really that painful, or maybe it was at first, but I never really had to repeatedly try a boss through more than once or twice, except for one thing, the training challenges. These training challenges that you could access through the shelter is probably the most intense of the gameplay challenges that there are in Pragmata. I honestly wish some of these were actually incorporated into the main campaign, but at the same time I completely understand why they didn't. Apart from maybe these timing gimmicks with the activating the switches or the gates, trying to rush from point A to B within a limited time frame, there were no more than a few times that I had to deal with the jamming device that completely blocked out Diana's ability to hack. They could easily make the game a few orders of difficulty higher simply by adding these anti-fun antennas to regular encounters in the game. They didn't, and I appreciate that, and I never want to see these or those rotating lasers ever again, because they just destroy fun, like the spike traps in Megaman. Finally, for the story, well, there's really not a lot of twists in it, but I honestly think that's for the best. I think Capcom is at its peak when it's not trying to be a convoluted narrative game. They deliver the best story experience when they leave some blanks for the player to fill up, save for maybe some plot holes that at this point I'm feeling very charitable to forgive. The characters are genuinely charming and you grow a real fondness for them as you play through the game. You see Hugh slowly get more attached to the android, and it's pretty nice. There's actually variations of what they talk about as you go around key points in certain stages, which was more than a welcome surprise for me when I was backtracking for the loot I've missed. Capcom chose to focus on the characters and how you'll watch them journey together, and I think that was the correct move, 100%. Pragmata feels like a game from the PS2 or Xbox 360 era with the side and extra content it provides. Because instead of it being on some battle pass or other form of DLC, it's already all packaged within the game. You can complete side challenges like collecting all sorts of cabin figures by shooting at them as you find them across levels hidden away, like the Metal Gear Solid 3's Caro challenge. You can also opt to engage with Cabin's Stamp Rally, which mainly gives you some mods and other optional skins that you and Diana can fashion however you like, whenever you like. Of course, there's the standard data log and bestiary viewer, which I appreciate being able to look at because they're not trying to kill me there. And with a pleasant surprise, there's actually more content after finishing the game. Of course, you have the option of playing New Game Plus, but you also can play Lost Signal, which gives you a set of challenges and revamped bosses to fight against. All these give you mods and, in one case, a new weapon to play around with, which I think are all very appreciated for those who simply want more of this game given its rather brief stay. Clocking about 10 hours of play after rolling credits on Pragmata, I feel like it's a new day. Many games these days are actually pretty much designed to be your daily hamster wheel that slowly built within me a cynicism about the game industry, where it was only interested in keeping my attention and, more importantly, my funds on their side of the street. Pragmata gave me a light at the end of that tunnel through all this. Much like how you would share stories with Diana, Capcom has demonstrated to me that it still remembers the times that gaming was more direct, more personal, more simple, and most importantly, more experimental. But what mattered most of all was how this title was focused on helping the player have a good time, whether it be liking Diana and the bond she forms with you, the unique and tricky balance of puzzle action gameplay that Pragmata brings, or the perfect pacing that they set the game at. Pragmata never tried to be more than anything it wasn't, and it felt very easy for me to overlook whatever shortcomings it may have had just because of that. It's a title that grabbed my attention away from the usual rotation of gacha games and Monster Hunter, and honestly, I find that an achievement. The only other thing I can think of right now that could do that would be maybe a new Megaman game. So, Pragmata, play it. Pragmata hits all of the nodes in the right places, scoring a 5 out of 5. Available on PS5, PC, Xbox, and the Switch too. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll try to come up with the next one a little faster. I know it takes months sometimes, but here I am. And for those that you want to see updates more regularly, we do have the site raymarufiles.com. We're also on the social media sites, so do check us out there. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to work. I'm gonna go. Till next time.